Greetings, everyone. Thanks so much to comrades who sent me the judgment, 16-page document um, of the case of the African amnesties and the others, that is the Zimbabwe holders of Zimbabwe exemption permits. I might say, when reading through this judgment, I was a bit lost of the intention of going to court on this, because if one reads the entire judgment, one realizes that procedurally there were procedural flaws in terms of submitting in terms of approaching the courts or submitting their papers, which then, from a legal point of view, it killed the whole primary objective of the permanent residence for holders of the Zimbabwe exemption permits. As we discussed briefly, the court order in the previous video, it means to me, in my understanding, that these people have to start from scratch if they want to continue to argue their case. But let me just read what the court says. It's paragraph 33. I read, court, the notice intends to further amend the so-called amended notice of motion dated 15 March 2022. This amended notice of motion was itself not granted by the court. In other words, a non-existent amended notice of motion is sought to be amended. Logically, if the amendment now sought is not granted because of the fatal defects referred to above, and the notice of 15 March 2022 is itself non-existent for lack of being granted, only the notice of motion of 12 October 2021 remains. That notice of motion has become irrelevant in these proceedings because the notice of motion of 15 March 2022 was launched as a new application after the affidavit of Ms. Dimejo was replaced by the so-called amended founding affidavit deposed by Mr. Chiwuta. It must be added here that on 12 October 2022, Ms. Sandra Chinyanya deposed to a supplementary founding affidavit. She claims to be the chairperson of the second applicant without stating what happened to Mr. Chiwuta, close quote. It was, for a lack of better word, confusion on this matter. But the issue that we are briefly discussing in this video is that the minister, if he wanted, he would have granted permanent residence to holders of the Zimbabwe exemption permit. The problem with this approach was that it became a legal issue, but more of a publicity, if I were to use this, because the people that approached the courts, instead of preparing their papers, which I'm saying there was a serious procedural lack of procedure in terms of filing the papers, approaching the courts to do amendments. They spent most of their time doing media interviews. And of course, the media likes this. They were on TV stations carrying out a campaign of this, and this irritated South Africans. It actually killed any cause of granting permanent residence to holders of Zimbabwe exemption permits, because the people involved in this case, they went on a media campaign instead of preparing for the court, but they chose a media campaign. And of course, like I'm saying, the media gets excited about these things, and this killed the whole possible granting of permanent residence to the holders of Zimbabwe exemption permits. A ZEP holder can be granted a permanent residence permit if there's good cause, and indeed there's good cause. As we said from the onset, that the permits themselves were negotiated. The cabinet in 2009 or 2010 had a good cause to grant temporary special permits to Zimbabweans who were in South Africa. Some were undocumented, some were using other documents which we've discussed. So there was good cause to grant Zimbabweans special permits in 2010. And again, there is good cause of granting permanent residence to holders of Zimbabwe exemption permits. The only difference or the key issue here is how do you arrive at granting ZEP holders permanent residence? Do you arrive through carrying out a media campaign, going to courts and so forth? And we hold the view that no, that is not the best route. The best route in our view is to negotiate. This is why from the onset we said you need to negotiate. Because if you negotiate, and indeed there is a good cause, because the holders of Zimbabwe exemption permits are working. If you go through the Immigration Act, the minister has powers under good cause to say this person has been working in South Africa, right? There is proof that this person is on a permanent job. So you need to negotiate because it is more political, but the cabinet will have to work within the Immigration Act. I had approached Advocate Simba Chitando in 2021. I actually approached the ZANU-PF leadership in South Africa in October 2021 before the announcement was made, because remember, this announcement to go to court was made before the announcement by government that it was terminating the Zimbabwe exemption permits. And I said, comrades, what is it that you are now doing? Because we understood at the time that Advocate Simba Chitando was chairperson of ZANU-PF for Sandton branch. And I was saying to these comrades, ZANU-PF leadership in South Africa, how do you begin to take the South African government to court when it granted special permits to Zimbabweans in 2010 through a negotiated process? Because you'll recall that the two ministers of Home Affairs, then co-ministers of Home Affairs from Zimbabwe, were part of these negotiations in 2010. So how do you then suddenly, before even an announcement is made on the future of the Zimbabwe exemption permits, approach the courts? So I did this discussion with the ZANU-PF comrades, and they facilitated that we meet with Advocate Simba Chitando, and I raised these issues with him, that we do not agree with you that you should go to court. Of course, we thought that in the first meeting with the Advocate Simba Chitando, there was meeting of the minds. But later on, we had major differences to an extent that he blocked me. We were no longer on talking terms. He blocked me. Because we were saying it is wrong from our own point of view to go to court. While we understand that there is a good cause, and which we still maintain, under the Immigration Act, the Minister of Home Affairs, supported by the South African Cabinet, can grant permanent residence to holders of ZEP. But this cannot be done through a media campaign which is anti the South African government. I want to admit, I have seen some comrades going to TV rooms, stations, blasting the South African government as xenophobic and so forth. That's not the approach. And I might say it has hardened the attitude not only of the South African government, but the attitude of South Africans, that we are not grateful. If African Amnesty, as led by Advocate Simba Chitando, were to pursue this case, from where I stand, I don't see them winning. In fact, as I was explaining the other day, the judgment or the order of the court, which I must also thank my YouTube comrades who explained in simple terms on what Order 3 means, which says cause shall be cause in the cause, meaning that the losers of this court case will have to pay the winners. So you are likely to have these comrades losing this court case. And the South African government, through the Department of Home Affairs, and everyone cited as respondents, claiming to be paid. Because this is what the order of the court says, which this might run up to around 700,000 rands. I don't know their source of funding, but it is highly possible that this might happen. But as I'm saying, there's good cause, as I'm concluding, there's good cause to grant holders of the Zimbabwe exemption permits permanent residence in South Africa. But you do not achieve this through a media campaign, through a court action. You do not achieve this by that. You can only achieve this by engaging diplomatically, engaging the political parties in South Africa, engaging government. Because the good cause is that holders of Zimbabwe exemption permits are working in South Africa. It is a enough good cause that they've proved that they've been part of this economy in South Africa. It's a good cause. Then the minister would close down, right, these special permits and grant people permanent residence. So the minister, under the circumstances, has chosen another route, which also leads to permanent residence. And the minister, the route that he has chosen is that because the majority of the holders of Zimbabwe exemption permits do not qualify to apply for other visas, the minister says, submit your application, what is called a waiver, state your case, I will waiver the requirements, you then apply for a general work visa. Once you apply for a general work visa, after 5 years, you can then apply for a PR. That is if you will still be having your job. Yes, it might appear to be a longer process, but this is what leads to. Because the permit, the special permit, it clearly marked that you cannot apply for a permanent residence. It is clearly written. So if it is clearly written, there must be a good cause of why a ZEP holder can be granted a permanent residence. As I'm saying, the good cause is that the person is working, is studying, is running a business, right? Then the minister terminates the special permits and they grant a permanent residence. All this is done through dialogue, through negotiations, not what we've seen in the past from 2021. Please share your views in the comment section. But I might say it has actually, this media campaign has hardened the hearts of South Africans and the government. This is why we are now seeing what the ANC is saying, that they were naive to say South Africa belongs to all who live in it. because we are now regarded as a people who are not grateful. We will continue with the discussion. Please like this video, circulate, and subscribe to this YouTube channel. I am Mabuto Nicholas Mabene. If you are on TikTok, please follow us. Otherwise, have a great weekend.